The call came at 7:43 a.m. on a Tuesday, 6 months and 8 days after they'd restructured my position. Lars Eriksson, thick Norwegian accent, very polite. "Mr. Davidson, we have discovered a significant problem with Lone Star Energy's compliance status. Are you available to discuss?" I was drinking coffee in my little office above Eddie's BBQ, watching the sunrise over Houston's industrial district. 6 months earlier, I'd been Lone Star's senior compliance engineer. Now, I was about to find out they'd made a $425 million mistake. My name's Carl Davidson, 52, and I've been keeping oil and gas companies legally compliant for 18 years. Before that, I spent 25 years in the Navy making sure submarine nuclear reactors didn't melt down. Same principle, different uniform. When something breaks in nuclear engineering, people die. When compliance breaks in manufacturing, companies die. The day that started this whole mess was a Tuesday too. Brooke Patterson walked into our quarterly safety meeting and called my compliance team legacy overhead with outdated processes. I knew right then Lone Star Energy was heading for a cliff. Look, Brooke had that entitled MBA energy you see everywhere these days. Designer blazer, fresh manicure, and the kind of confidence that comes from never actually failing at anything that mattered. CEO's niece, newly appointed Chief Innovation Officer, whatever the hell that meant in an 89-year-old oil and gas equipment company. She didn't shake hands when we were introduced. She gave finger waves and said things like digital transformation and AI-powered compliance monitoring while sipping a $12 green smoothie like she'd invented efficiency. Nobody asked her to present that day. Nobody stopped her either. She clicked through a PowerPoint titled Streamlining Legacy Functions, Phase 1. Phase 1, it turned out, was gutting my department. I'd been Lone Star's named SOC2 compliance officer for 8 years. That's 8 years of building safety protocols from scratch, watching regulatory changes sweep through oil and gas like hurricanes, documenting every nightmare scenario the EPA, OSHA, and API could throw at us. I had 3 external audits under my belt with 0 violations. My filing cabinets were organized like a submarine's inventory system, everything labeled, dated, cross-referenced. Brooke didn't even know what SOC2 meant. I watched her Google it during the meeting. That morning, she stood there grinning with her uncle's company credit card, called compliance an outdated support function, and suggested we automate oversight using AI solutions. My department was redundant, she said, overstaffed. My $82,000 salary plus $12,000 in benefits eliminated. That's $94,000 in annual savings, she bragged. Almost a full marketing budget upgrade. Someone actually clapped. I didn't. I just capped my pen and asked, "Are we done here?" Brooke left with her spreadsheet and a satisfied little nod. I went back to my office and opened a fresh binder. It wasn't anger. Wasn't even surprise, really. It was protocol, military habit. When someone's about to make a catastrophic mistake, you document everything and prepare for damage control. Thing is, I started backing up files. Every access credential, every compliance designation, every legal document where my name appeared as the responsible authority. Most people at Lone Star didn't realize our entire regulatory framework still required my formal signature. Every quarterly filing, every safety certification, every audit response had Carl Davidson listed as primary contact. No replacement had been designated. Nobody could replace me without board approval and formal reassignment paperwork filed within 21 calendar days. But Brooke didn't know that. Her Uncle Chuck, the CEO, probably didn't either. At first, I thought someone would pump the brakes. Maybe HR would hesitate. Maybe Chuck, who once called me the guy who keeps us out of federal prison, might speak up. But nothing. HR sent the reclassification paperwork 4 days later. My new title, Senior Administrative Coordinator. My security clearance was downgraded. My invitations to leadership meetings disappeared overnight. I nodded. No complaints. Even congratulated Brooke when she bragged about hitting her first efficiency target. She actually gave me a thumbs up and called me Carl D. So I printed the original SOC2 designation letter, the one signed by the board in 2019, and emailed it to my personal account with a timestamp. Then I printed 2 copies. One went into my home filing cabinet, the other into a binder labeled Regulatory Continuity, Archive Only, and I quietly placed it in the legal department's storage room. 4th shelf, left side. Didn't tell anyone. See, people think revenge needs to be loud. Dramatic exits and angry speeches about being unappreciated. But nobody appreciates a landmine either until someone steps on it. The real beauty was in Section 12.3 of our business continuity plan, a clause I'd added 3 years ago after watching a competitor get hammered with $4.2 million in fines for improper compliance handoffs. It stated that any change to the named compliance officer must be formally reassigned by board resolution within 21 calendar days, or the designation becomes legally invalid, retroactive to the vacancy date. Oil and gas compliance fines start at $15,000 per day for minor violations. After 90 days of continued violation, they escalate to $35,000 per day. The math gets ugly fast. Brooke had no idea. Legal hadn't checked. Chuck just signed off on the efficiency report without reading the details. 6 weeks after the streamlining, I turned in my resignation. Clean and simple. Effective 14 days from today, I'll be stepping down from my position at Lone Star Energy Systems. That's it. No drama, no exit interview demands, no company-wide email about being undervalued. They processed it like routine paperwork, disabled my access by end of day. The IT ticket was so rushed they misspelled my name and forgot to update the compliance registry. My son Austin called that night to check on me. He's a junior at Texas A&M studying petroleum engineering. Smart kid, smarter than his old man in most ways, but he inherited my attention to detail. Dad, you sure about this? What about my tuition? Spring semester's coming up. Trust me, son, this is going to work out. Your old man didn't spend 25 years in the Navy without learning how to plan for contingencies. Sounds like you've got something up your sleeve. Just following proper procedures. Sometimes that's all it takes. Thing is, Austin had been giving me grief about being too rigid, too by the book. Called me old school more than once. I didn't argue with him. Kids his age think experience is just another word for being stuck in the past. He'd figure it out eventually. That weekend, I updated my profile on the Federal Compliance Registry, setting my certification to active executive designation relinquished, no replacement filed, effective day 28. Then I registered as an independent consultant specializing in crisis compliance recovery. 24 hours later, my phone started ringing. By Monday, I had 4 serious inquiries, 2 from law firms representing companies in regulatory trouble, 1 from a boutique consulting group, and 1 from a Norwegian energy conglomerate that specialized in acquiring American mid-market manufacturers. That last one made me smile. Across town, Lone Star hummed along without missing a beat. No exit procedures, no knowledge transfer, no replacement training. Brooke was already planning phase 2 of her optimization strategy. Chuck started talking about the company's new agility mindset in industry interviews. Nobody noticed the compliance clock ticking toward day 22. I set up shop in a small office above Eddie's BBQ on Navigation Boulevard. 2 desks, a coffee maker that worked half the time, and a view of the shipping channel. Rent was $900 a month. My first consulting contract paid $295 per hour. The math worked better than my old salary. Every morning, I'd walk downstairs and get coffee from Eddie, old Marine who'd run the place for 25 years. We'd talk about the Astros, the weather, sometimes about business. He knew I'd left Lone Star but didn't pry. Military guys understand when someone doesn't want to talk about work. "How's the consulting business?" Eddie asked one morning, pouring me a fresh cup. "Can't complain. Turns out there's a lot of companies out there that don't know what they don't know. Always is. My dad used to say the most dangerous thing in business is a man who thinks he's smarter than his own rules." Eddie had that right. Problem with people like Brooke is they think rules are suggestions. In the Navy, we had a saying, procedures are written in blood. Every regulation, every safety protocol exists because someone, somewhere learned the hard way what happens when you don't follow them. Day 43 of Lone Star's compliance. Violation. I got a call from an oil services company in Louisiana. Their compliance officer had quit without notice, and they were facing a regulatory audit in 6 weeks. Panic mode. I quoted them $350 per hour plus expenses for a 4-week emergency engagement. They said yes before I finished the sentence. "Mr. Davidson, we're in deep trouble here," their plant manager told me on the phone. "Our guy left everything a mess. Files scattered, certifications expired. Nobody knows what we're supposed to file or when." "Sir, that's exactly the kind of situation I specialize in. I can have your documentation organized and audit ready in 3 weeks. You sure about that?" 25 years keeping nuclear reactors from melting down, sir. I'm sure. Day 67. I was on a plane to Oklahoma helping a refinery navigate an EPA investigation. Their previous compliance team had missed a filing deadline. The potential fines were in the millions. My job was to reconstruct their documentation trail and prove good faith compliance efforts. Military precision and attention to detail. Same skills, different battlefield. Austin called while I was in Tulsa. Dad, I've been thinking about what you said, about procedures and planning ahead. What about it? Well, I was looking at some of the compliance engineering programs here at A&M. The professors are saying it's a growing field. Good job, security. I smiled. Kid was starting to get it. Your old man might have mentioned that once or twice. Yeah, you did. I'm thinking about adding a minor in environmental compliance. What do you think? I think that's smart planning, son. Always good to have skills that companies actually need. Speaking of which, heard anything from your old job lately? Nothing worth talking about. Day 89, the escalating fine structure kicked in for Lone Star. Not that anyone there knew it yet. Oil and gas compliance violations become exponentially more expensive after 90 days. The daily penalty jumped from $15,000 to $35,000. Still invisible, still accumulating, still retroactive to day 22. I was back in Houston when Eddie mentioned he'd heard some rumors. Word is, Lone Star's got some kind of deal cooking. Big Norwegian company sniffing around. That so? Yeah. Chuck Patterson was in here last week bragging about it. Said they were going to be millionaires. I sipped my coffee and watched a barge make its way down the channel. Funny how things work out. Day 95, Austin called with news. He'd been accepted into A&M's Accelerated Compliance Engineering program. New field, growing demand, excellent job prospects. Guess who inspired me to look into it, he said. Your old man's rubbing off on you. More like I realized there's job security in keeping people out of trouble. Plus, the starting salaries are really good. Smart thinking. Companies are always going to need people who know how to follow the rules. Dad, can I ask you something? Shoot. You really think Lone Star's going to be okay without you? I looked out my window at the Houston skyline, thinking about Section 12.3 and the compliance clock that nobody over there was watching. Son, some lessons you can't teach. Some folks got to learn the hard way. Day 120, Lone Star announced the deal of the century. Press release went out at 9 a.m. Lone Star Energy Systems to be acquired by Nordic Energy Solutions for $425 million. The story made the Houston Business Journal front page. Chuck was quoted extensively about Lone Star's innovative operational transformation under new leadership. Brooke was quoted too. She'd positioned herself as the architect of Lone Star's lean operational model that attracted international attention. The article mentioned her strategic elimination of redundant legacy functions as a key factor in Nordic's interest. I read it over my morning coffee at Eddie's. The old Marine saw me smiling at the newspaper. Good news? He asked. You could say that. Sometimes patience pays off. Eddie glanced at the headline. That your old outfit? Used to be. $425 million. That's serious money. Sure is. I folded the paper and finished my coffee. Wonder if they dotted all their I's and crossed all their T's. Eddie gave me a look. Military guys know that tone. Sounds like maybe they didn't. Well, that'd be their problem, wouldn't it? Day 135, the due diligence team from Nordic Energy Solutions arrived in Houston. Professional, thorough, and led by Dr. Ingrid Weber, who spoke 5 languages and had the kind of attention to detail that made German engineering legendary. Her team included Lars Eriksson, a compliance specialist who'd spent 15 years auditing American acquisitions for European companies. Austin called that evening, excited about the news. Dad, did you see? Your old company's getting bought out. $425 million. Yeah, I saw. That's crazy money. Think they'll keep all the employees? Hard to say, son. These international buyouts, sometimes they clean house, sometimes they don't. Kind of weird timing though, right? I mean, they just restructured everything, got rid of you and your team, and now suddenly they're worth $500 million? Smart kid. Funny how that works out. You don't sound surprised. Son, I learned a long time ago that in business, timing is everything. Sometimes companies get lucky, sometimes they don't. The Nordic team spent their first week reviewing financial records, operational metrics, and safety protocols. Everything looked clean. Brooke had prepared beautiful presentations about streamlined operations and reduced overhead. The numbers were impressive. The timeline was aggressive. Chuck had already started talking about integration plans. Nordic executives were optimistic. This looked like exactly the kind of lean, efficient American manufacturer they wanted in their portfolio. Lone Star's management team was confident. Legal had reviewed everything twice. The deal was on track for closing in 2 weeks, but I knew something they didn't. Lars Eriksson wasn't just any compliance specialist. Guy had a reputation in the industry. Norwegian companies don't mess around when it comes to regulatory compliance. They'd learned the hard way that American acquisition targets sometimes had surprises buried in their paperwork. Day 140, Eddie mentioned he'd seen some foreign-looking folks in suits around town. Norwegians, I told him. Due diligence team. They buying Lone Star? Trying to. You think it'll go through? I shrugged. Depends on what they find when they start digging. Day 145, Austin called again. He'd been following the story in the local business press. Dad, I've been reading about this Nordic energy deal. The professors here are saying it's a big deal for Houston. Lot of jobs at stake. That's usually how these things work. You ever deal with international compliance stuff when you were there? Some. European companies are pretty thorough. They don't like surprises. What kind of surprises? Oh, paperwork that's not filed right. Certifications that aren't up to date. Procedures that aren't being followed. Stuff like that could kill a deal. Son, I've seen deals twice this size fall apart over a missing signature. Austin was quiet for a moment. Dad, when you left Lone Star, everything was clean, right? Everything I was responsible for was documented properly. Can't speak for what happened after I left. Day 147, Lars Eriksson was getting deep into the compliance review. Nordic's legal team had given him a checklist of regulatory requirements that needed verification. Standard stuff: environmental permits, safety certifications, federal compliance designations. The kind of paperwork that most American companies kept in good order. Most companies. Day 148, Lars was in Lone Star's legal archive room cross-referencing regulatory filings with personnel records. Routine due diligence, nothing unusual. He wasn't looking for problems, just verifying that all certifications were current and properly maintained. That's when he found my binder. 4th shelf, left side, exactly where I'd left it 4 months earlier. Regulatory continuity, archive only. Now, Lars had seen a lot of American companies' filing systems. Some were good, some were adequate, most were barely acceptable. But this binder was different. It was organized like a military operation. Every document labeled, cross-referenced, dated. Professional grade work. He opened it and started reading. The original SOC2 designation letter. The business continuity plan with section 12.3 highlighted. The timeline requirements. The board resolution from 2019 that was never superseded. Lars spent an hour going through every document. Then he cross-referenced the dates with Lone Star's current compliance registry. Then he pulled out his calculator. The math was simple and brutal. Day 22 through day 148 equals 126 days of compliance violation. First 90 days at $15,000 per day equals $1.35 million. Remaining 36 days at $35,000 per day equals $1.26 million. Total exposure $2.61 million and climbing at $35,000 per day until resolved. But it got worse. Because no replacement had been designated, every regulatory filing, every safety certification, every compliance document submitted during those 126 days was legally invalid. Lone Star had been misrepresenting its regulatory standing to customers, insurers, and potential buyers for over 4 months, including Nordic Energy Solutions. Lars called Dr. Weber immediately. Day 149, Thursday morning, 9:15 a.m. Lars Eriksson walked into the Lone Star boardroom carrying a folder that would destroy everything Brooke had built. "Who is Carl Davidson?" he asked, setting the folder on the conference table. Brooke looked confused. "He used to work here. We restructured his position last year as part of our operational optimization, but he is still listed as your named SOC2 compliance officer," Lars said, opening the folder. "According to your federal registry and this documentation, he remains the designated authority for all regulatory filings." Chuck leaned forward. "That's impossible. We handled his transition months ago." Lars wasn't smiling. "Where is the board resolution replacing him? The formal reassignment documentation? The updated federal notifications?" Silence. Brooke started typing frantically on her phone. Chuck was already reaching for his. Legal was called out of another meeting. HR scrambled to find records that didn't exist. We assumed the transition was automatic when we restructured his role, someone from HR offered weakly. Lars shook his head. Federal compliance designations are never automatic. They require explicit board action and formal replacement within 21 calendar days. You have been operating without valid compliance authority for exactly 126 days. Dr. Weber, who'd been quietly reviewing Lars's findings, looked up from her laptop. This represents a material misrepresentation of regulatory standing during preliminary negotiations. Brooke tried to salvage the situation. It's just paperwork. We can fix this in a day. Bring Carl back, file the forms, move forward. No, Dr. Weber said firmly. You cannot retroactively fix federal compliance violations. Oil and gas compliance fines escalate after 90 days. Your current exposure is $2.61 million, increasing by $35,000 daily. The room went dead quiet. Chuck's face had gone gray. Surely we can resolve this. It's a procedural oversight. Lars opened his laptop and turned the screen toward the table. Your compliance violations create significant liability exposure for any acquiring entity. But more concerning is the pattern of negligence. Mr. Davidson left detailed documentation showing that proper procedures were available and ignored. He clicked to the next slide. Section 12.3 of your own business continuity plan, authored by Mr. Davidson, explicitly outlines the 21-day requirement. This was not an oversight. This was willful ignorance. Dr. Weber closed her laptop slowly. This is a material breach of due diligence representations. We are terminating acquisition proceedings immediately. Chuck stood up abruptly. Dr. Weber, surely we can work through this. The deal is scheduled to close next week. Mr. Patterson, your company has been operating in federal violation for over 4 months while representing full compliance to potential buyers. This creates unacceptable liability exposure for Nordic Energy. That afternoon, Lars called me directly. Professional courtesy, he said. Wanted to understand the timeline of my departure and the transition procedures that were supposed to be followed. I was in my office above Eddie's working on a compliance manual for a client in New Mexico. The call was expected. I'd been counting days on my calendar, watching the violation accumulate like compound interest. Mr. Davidson, this is Lars Eriksson from Nordic Energy. We are reviewing Lone Star Energy's regulatory standing as part of acquisition due diligence. Yes, sir. How can I help you? I gave him the dates. Restructured on day 1, resigned effective day 42, final day 56. Explained the proper procedures, confirmed that no formal replacement had ever been designated. When he asked if I'd attempted to notify Lone Star of the compliance gap, I mentioned the binder. Regulatory continuity, archive only, I told him. 4th shelf, left side in legal storage, should still be there. We found it, Lars said. Very thorough documentation. Section 12.3 of the Business Continuity Plan appears to address this exact scenario. Yes, sir. I wrote that clause in 2021 after watching a competitor get hit with $4.2 million in fines for improper compliance handoff. Seemed like prudent risk management. Indeed. Are you currently available for consulting engagement? Depends on the scope and timeline. What did you have in mind? Day 150, Friday morning. Dr. Weber called an emergency meeting. Chuck, Brooke, the board, legal counsel, everyone who mattered. She laid out the situation in terms that left no room for interpretation. Lone Star Energy has been operating in violation of federal compliance requirements for 126 days. The regulatory fines currently total $2.61 million and increase by $35,000 daily until resolved. Furthermore, every compliance document submitted during this period is legally invalid. This includes safety certifications, environmental filings, and regulatory representations made to Nordic Energy during preliminary negotiations. Chuck's voice was barely a whisper. What does this mean for the acquisition? It means the acquisition is terminated, Dr. Weber said flatly. Effective immediately. Our legal team has identified material misrepresentation that creates unacceptable liability exposure. The Nordic team was packed and gone by noon. Their final act was to formally notify Lone Star's board that due diligence had revealed material compliance violations and misrepresentation of regulatory standing. The press release went out Monday morning. Nordic Energy withdraws from Lone Star Energy acquisition due to unresolved regulatory compliance issues. Lone Star's stock opened down 18% and kept falling. By market close, it had dropped 31% in a single day. Tuesday morning, my phone rang again. Dr. Weber this time. Mr. Davidson, Nordic Energy is interested in retaining your services for a comprehensive compliance review of our North American operations. 18-month contract, $295 per hour. Full autonomy over methodology and timeline. Are you available? I looked around my little office. Coffee maker that worked half the time, view of the shipping channel, and a stack of consulting contracts that had tripled my old salary. Yes, ma'am. I'm available. Day 153, Wednesday afternoon. Chuck Patterson announced his early retirement, effective immediately. The press release cited personal reasons and desire to spend time with family. The board called an emergency meeting to discuss leadership transitions and operational restructuring. Brooke was asked to submit her resignation by Friday. No press release for that one. Austin called that weekend, excited about his acceptance into A&M's compliance engineering program. He'd been following the Lone Star story in the business news. Dad, they're using this as a case study in my business law class. Professor says it's a perfect example of how cutting corners on compliance can destroy shareholder value. What's your take on it? That someone at Lone Star knew exactly what they were doing when they wrote those procedures, and someone else ignored them because they thought they knew better. You know what's funny? I used to think you were too rigid about following rules. Now I'm thinking maybe that's not such a bad thing. Smart thinking, son. Rules exist for a reason. Eddie poured me a fresh cup of coffee Monday morning. Heard about your old company. Rough break. Some folks gotta learn the hard way. Word gets around in this industry. Company that fires their compliance officer to save money. Other companies remember that. Austin's right about job security. There's always demand for people who can keep companies out of federal prison. Business is good. Really good. The Lone Star building sits mostly empty now. For lease signs in the windows. Brooks' consulting business never got off the ground. Chuck's retirement in Florida is probably comfortable, but his reputation in Houston manufacturing circles is finished. Me? I'm the guy companies call when they want to make sure their compliance officer is irreplaceable. Because experience beats innovation every single time, especially when the stakes are measured in hundreds of millions, and someone's counting on you to know where all the exits are located. Just took them $425 million to figure that out.